Consider something strange. We spend so much of life imagining that wisdom is a matter of force. Push harder, define more clearly, master the thing, conquer the terrain, name what is happening, and pin it to the wall like a specimen under glass. The deeper one goes into life, the stranger that approach begins to feel. Because not everything opens by force. Some things open only in stillness. Some things arrive sideways. Some revelations come not when we seize them, but when we soften enough to receive them. There is an old wisdom in this. The wisdom that reality is not made of enemies, but polarities. Light and dark, motion and rest, surrender and will. The bright blade of Yang and the hidden well of Yin. Not opposites in conflict, but partners in the great rhythm of being. The feminine appears again and again as one of the great symbolic forces of depth itself. Not simply softness, not merely gender. Receptivity, intuition, relationship, beauty, gestation, sorrow, mystery, and transformation. Welcome back, my fellow stranger, to another episode of Traversing the Strange World. I'm your host, Isaiah Danbury, and you're listening to another installment of the Thursday Journal, Notes from the Strange World. And today we're going to talk about the divine feminine, the yin to the yang. When we look at myth, the divine feminine does not just appear in one form. She is not merely the woman in the story. She is a force. She appears as a mother, a lover, a queen, a priestess, a muse, a destroyer, and an oracle. She gives life and she takes illusion away. She nourishes, but she also comforts. She beautifies the world, but she can also unravel the man who approaches her wrongly. That is one of the things the old stories understood all too well. The feminine was never treated as shallow. It was not an accessory. It was one of the great powers moving through reality itself. Sometimes she appears as the mother, the great mother, the source, the fertile one, the nourisher, the shelter, the one from whom life flows. This form, the feminine, is abundance, protection, tenderness, the womb of existence itself. But even here, myth is careful. The mother is not always gentle in a sentimental sense. She can also be engulfing. Too much comfort can be suffocation. Too much shelter can keep a soul from growing. And at other times, the divine feminine appears as the lover, the enchantress, the radiant one. Here she is beauty, desire, magnetism, embodied aliveness. She awakens longing. She draws the hero out of numbness, in contact with the fire of life. But myth also warns us here, desire can elevate a man, but it can also possess him. Beauty can awaken devotion, or it can expose how easily a man loses himself in what he does not know, in what he does not know how to approach with reverence. Then there is the feminine as queen, as sovereign, as one who does not merely attract but carries dignity, order, and sacred authority. In this form, she is not chaos, but rightful power. She reflects that the feminine is not only soft, receptive, or emotional, she can also be regal, discerning, immovable, and crowned with meaning. And then there is the priestess, the oracle, the wise woman. This is one of the most fascinating forms to me, linked with hidden knowledge, intuition, vision, dreams, symbols, the things that cannot be seized by force. The hero cannot simply overpower this realm. He has to listen. He has to learn another mode of perception. He has to become quiet enough to receive what the deeper layers of reality are trying to reveal. But myth does not stop there, because myth is honest. The feminine also appears as the terrible and the dark. Not evil, but terrible in the old sense. Powerful, fearsome, on-making. She appears as death, judgment, night, the abyss, chaos. the force that tears down what is false. There are feminine figures in myth who do not comfort the ego. They shatter it. They expose it. They drag a person into transformation, whether he welcomes it or not. And that matters because the sacred is not always something soothing. Sometimes what is divine first arrives as disruption. Sometimes grace feels like unraveling. Sometimes the feminine in myth does not come to affirm the hero as he is, to strip away what he can no longer remain. And then finally, there is the feminine as the muse, as the soul guide, as one who awakens longing for something beyond the ordinary. She calls the man not merely into romance, but into depth, into art, and into reverence, into the realization that life is not just machinery and survival, but mystery. So when we speak of the divine feminine myth, we are speaking of something vast. We are speaking of life, death, beauty and terror, seduction and wisdom, comfort and initiation, love and judgment, creation and transformation. The old stories knew that the feminine was not just some side story in the human drama. It was one of the deepest realities a person could encounter. Not because it was always pleasant, not because it was always safe, but because it was always powerful. And perhaps that is why these stories endure. Because somewhere deep down, we still recognize that there are forces in life that cannot be conquered through willpower alone. They must be encountered. They must be respected. And sometimes they must be surrendered to, so that something deeper in us can be born. And if myth shows us the divine feminine in story, Carl Jung helps us see how archetypal realities also live within the psyche. They are expressions of deep patterns within the human soul. They reveal reoccurring structures of meaning, recurring energies, recurring ways that the psyche encounters life, mystery, love, fear, transformation, and the sacred. And through that lens, the divine feminine is not just a figure out there in ancient stories. She is also an inward reality, an archetypal presence within the depths of the psyche itself. In Jungian language, we might say that the feminine appears in the symbolic life of the soul as a carrier of things like feeling, eros, intuition, receptivity, beauty, depth, relatedness, imagination, mystery. Not because women are reducible to these things, and not because men lack them, but because the psyche seems to repeatedly symbolize these dimensions of life through feminine imagery. And that is why dreams, myths, visions, and religious symbols so often portray the feminine in layered ways, as mother, as guide, as muse, as queen, as beloved, as the dark one, as the one who lures downward, and the one who gives birth and rebirth, as the keeper of hidden knowledge, as the embodiment of beauty, as the face of sorrow, and as wisdom clothed in image and symbol. Jung's great contribution here is to remind us that these are not merely literary decorations. These are signs of psychic reality. They point to the fact that human beings do not experience life only through reason and linear thought. We also experience it through image, symbol, longing, intuition, desire, dream, grief, and the mysterious movements of the unconscious. And the divine feminine often appears right at that threshold, at the border between the known and the unknown, between the surface self and the deeper self, between the world that we can explain and the world we can only encounter. This is why the feminine archetype can feel so powerful in inner life. It often gathers into itself everything that resists pure control, emotion, beauty, ambiguity, relationship, creativity, mourning, renewal, and mystery. In that sense, the divine feminine represents part of what keeps the soul from becoming mechanical. She reminds us that the psyche is not a machine. It is alive. It dreams, it suffers, it forms symbols, it speaks in images, it carries hidden knowledge, it moves through seasons of death and rebirth, and we become more capable of depth, more capable of listening, more capable of transformation, more capable of seeing that not everything real arrives as a concept. Some things arrive as image and as symbol, and maybe that's part of why symbols like yin and yang endure, because they point to something deeper than simple opposition. They suggest that reality is not built out of isolated forces, but complementary tensions, light and dark, active and receptive, structure and flow, penetrating force and containing depth, masculine and feminine, and the individual stands at the line between them, not as a creature meant to embody only one pole in a rigid way, but as someone constantly living at the meeting point of these energies, these tendencies, these modes of being. Within each of us is the tension between action and surrender, between reason and intuition, between assertion and receptivity, between will and wonder. And maturity may have something to do with learning how to stand at that threshold well, not collapsing one side to the other, not demonizing one in favor of the other, but learning the wisdom of right balance, right relation, and right expression. Perhaps to be whole is not to become purely one thing. Perhaps it is to become a conscious meeting place of the two. Some things in life cannot be conquered. They can only be encountered. Love is like that, grief is like that, beauty is like that, creation is like that. These are seasons where the right move is not force but receptivity, not noise but listening, not control but trust, not speed but gestation, not performance but depth. And maybe that is part of what the Divine Feminine teaches us. There is a kind of wisdom in learning how to receive, how to sit with mystery without immediately trying to reduce it, how to honor what is forming in the hidden places, how to let something ripen before demanding it become visible, and how to recognize that waiting is not always wasting time, how to understand that sorrow is not always an interruption of life, but sometimes part of what deepens it. And I would like to end today's installment with a quote from Alan Watts. There is no yang without the yin. Existence itself is relationship, and opposites are like solid space, up and down, life and death. They only make sense together. All right, my friends, my fellow stranger, thank you for tuning in to another installment of the Thursday Journal. Notes from a modern man living in a strange land. If you're listening on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, like and save. And it would mean the world to me if you'd maybe share this with a friend or on social media. Let's keep traversing this strange world. Let's remember to always be inquisitive, to always be introspective. Let's remember to be neighborly to folks, because we all kind of just woke up in this life thing and we don't know a lot about it. So at the end of the day, we're all just strangers in a strange land. Until next time, peace.